saw the video was the comment from the founder of High Tech High. And when he described what was special about it, he said, and I think I got it down, he said, it's all about making, doing, building, shaping. And I think what's striking to me is, remember, the name of the high school is not making, doing, building, shaping. It's called High Tech High. I think a lot of times people get confused because I do think that why it's successful is because of the making, doing, building, shaping, not because of the high tech. And I think, as Tony was also saying, the key is not about the specific technologies and materials, but about the ways in which you're engaging with it. And I think that struck me because I do think that's a key point about here at the Media Lab. Many times when people around the world hear about the Media Lab, they say, oh, that's sort of a leading technology center. Well, that's true, but I don't think that's what makes it special. There are lots of great technology centers. What I think makes this place special and a place for helping to continue to create innovators, in Tony's sense, is the fact that people here spend a lot of time making, doing, building, shaping. And I don't often like to say is, create is at the root of creativity. Giving people the opportunity to create is an important way of having them develop as creative thinkers.
One of my heroes is the founder of MIT, William Martin Rogers, who embedded in the DNA of this place a new, or at least some different approach to the world of professional learning, that is the blending of mind and hand. It's now MIT's motto, mens et manus, this combination of both thinking and doing, of being both theoretical and practical.
phrase that my mentor used, Seymour Papert, talked about constructionism. And sometimes I think it misleads people. Of course, it's about people learning by creating, designing, constructing things. But the word constructing feels too engineering oriented. And I do think part of it, when I have to think broadly about what does it mean to design to express yourself. So I think all forms of expressing yourself. So building something physical is one way of expressing yourself, and that's what's most associated with engineering. But when you're creating a birthday party, you're planning a birthday party, not just attending it, that's a creative experience as well. That's a way of expressing. The many things we do in our lives, whether it's in the work life or civic life or personal life, where we're just taking an idea and turning it into a project. I think the key to all of this is how do you take the germ of an idea and build upon it, iterate on it, as you were saying. You work together with others on it and see it evolve from that germ of an idea into a form of expression. That can take, again, all different forms. I think and that's what we would aim for, whether you're growing up to become an engineer or a journalist or a marketing manager, or a yoga instructor. All of those, do involve a type of design, whether it's, again, in your work life, civic life, or personal life.
I think that we have, being an institute of technology, this bias towards the world of the hard and physically engineered, and yet so many of my students have ambitions
about transmitting information from one person to a learner. And as long as we see education that way, we're not going to be creating the next generation of innovators. That innovators come from people who are doing the exploring, the experimenting, the expressing, not people from, as you were saying, passively receiving the information. So there's too much of this model across the whole education system that it's about, transmission of information. And for me, one of the great possibilities of new technology is it has the opportunity that we could use new technology to shift that educational pattern. But it doesn't happen automatically because technology can be used just to more efficiently transmit information. So if we use technology only to reinforce the existing system, it's just going to reinforce the old bad habits. So we have the opportunity to make a shift with new technology, but it won't happen automatically. But I think that's across the whole education system. I don't think it's a special problem with Research One universities. It's a problem across the whole education system. Again, as you said, my group's called Lifelong Kindergarten, because kindergarten had provided the right model. Part of the problem is that right now, even kindergartens are becoming more like the rest of the education system. Kindergarten is becoming a place where you're filling out your worksheets, and it's becoming more like the rest of school. What we need to do is make the rest of school and the rest of life more like kindergarten.
Do you want to comment on this? Yeah, Tony, it's unwise to overly generalize from anecdotal outliers. I mean, we have the counterexample here at MIT, the very most prolific faculty member, tenured university professor, institute professor Bob Langer is an incredible, inspiring force, is a
his ideas are very much aligned with the type of ideas that we talk about today. But I do think today we have some possibilities of implementing Dewey's ideas in ways that weren't possible in his time. So even if the ideas were the same, we could spread them more widely and use them for tackling a wider range of